My name is Shay Totten. I'm the Newsroom Success Manager here at American Press Institute, and I work on the product strategy team that supports the newsrooms who are using one of API's two products, Metrics for News and Source Matters. So today, this was sort of a follow-up to an event that maybe some of you attended in December, where API and ONA did sort of a joint session talking a little bit about what social media and what sort of audience engagement could look like, given some of the deprioritization that's been happening, along with Meta and even with some of the sort of implosion that seemed to be happening, or we feared was happening at the end of last year with Twitter. And so we put out a short survey to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the findings from there. And this is sort of a follow-up to kind of like keep thinking, like, as we move into 2023, with the resources we have and the opportunities and the challenges that lay ahead, what are some things we're thinking about doing? And so the breakout rooms, we're going to have some deeper discussions on that. And the zine that I hope all of you had a chance to take at least a look at beforehand, we're going to go through that as well, with some ideas on how you can both think creatively about some audience engagement, both on platform and off platform and on other people's platforms, as well as we want to talk a little bit about, what are maybe some staffing, product and technology challenges that you might be facing that might help inform some of these tech talks. So as for all of our API sessions and for a lot of sessions, I think you're probably accustomed to, the ground rules here, we do use Chatham House rules. And the reason we do that is we really are trying to create like a safe and supportive space to kind of really talk through issues and solutions and not have it necessarily be attributed to anybody. So we really want people to have, in the breakout rooms, we really want you to sort of think about and talk about and collaborate and peer learn as much as possible. So I'm going to go through the survey. I'm going to turn this over to the co-host, Amara, after that, and then we're going to get into breakout rooms. We're going to spend a good chunk of this meeting in breakout rooms with some facilitators, and then we'll come back at the end. We're not going to have a report out from breakout rooms. We're going to collect some of that information and share it back out with you, because we really want to give as much time as possible for you to have some discussions today. So, So the survey that we did at the end of last year and into a little bit of this year, we ended up surveying about 4 dozen newsrooms, large to small, small independent digital sites and local papers to national chains responded. And one of the things we were thinking really about was sort of initially it was focused on sort of what was happening with Twitter and some of the other platforms and what people might do or not do. Excuse me. And we sort of asked, like, if you plan to add more content to an existing social channel, as you see here, what was interesting to me is, well, and probably not surprising to a lot of you, is that Instagram came out on top, followed by TikTok, followed then by LinkedIn, and then followed by that by Facebook and Mastodon. And it's interesting to me because, like, especially with Instagram and TikTok, because I think a lot of folks, perhaps in this call, have heard, is once again, it seems like we're making another pivot to video. And I think those 3 words have we've all heard over and over again. But Mastodon came in pretty high, and I think that's, it's sort of it was the darling at the end of last year. I don't know if some of you found out this, but when I went to go set up a Mastodon account, turns out I had started one 5 years ago and then hadn't posted on it in probably 4. And so we'll see if that trend continues. We also asked some questions around just sort of how much you might consider, if you're considering to move to rely less on social platforms and maybe sort of move in a different direction, whether it's on your own platforms, newsletters, etc. And most people were, I think the general mood was like a wait and see attitude, but a willingness to sort of think about and experiment with some of, especially with TikTok, Instagram, and some of the more video oriented social platforms, is to be thinking through, like, what are some better strategies, not just go there for no reason, but like think through what those strategies could be. And so I'm going to put up a couple of quotes from varying levels of the response to kind of show the breadth of, like, what we heard back from what people might be thinking about doing this year. One of the interesting things that did come up from this too, and I think you may have seen this in some of these quotes, is the idea of control. And I think that was something that I know in the work I do and working with newsrooms, that comes up quite a bit. And, and as I've thought about it and sort of my own work in the industry, both as a reporter and a publisher and editor, and working on digital sites early in like the 2000s, was like thinking about this idea of how much sort of control as a whole have we given over to other social platforms to sort of take care of our reader engagement for us, rather than sort of like maybe owning more of it on our end, and then thinking about how that looks and what kind of tech stack we need, what kind of training we need for our staff. What does that really mean? So hopefully we get into some of those questions today. And feel free, we want the chat to be active both during the breakout sessions and during the main session. So if things spark interest to you, or you want to share something in the chat that you're working on, that you're doing, or you want some feedback on, please put it in there. We want to make that as lively as possible. So when we also asked folks at the end of last year, these are some of the sort of overarching themes that we're hoping that we can kind of tackle this year through some of these tech talks. And we are going to be doing at least one, since there's a lot of interest in newsletters. I know we're going to be doing one later this year on newsletter strategy and newsletters in general. So keep watch for that, and we'll tell you at the end of the session how to keep on top of what's coming in next for our tech talks. But also I think, the time, limited time and staff resources, as well as resources for tech development and tech integration, I think is also a key concern. And so that's something that we're also interested in thinking about on our team, on how to help newsrooms kind of think through that sort of tech stack development and a product roadmap. So without further ado, I will now turn over the rest of this beginning before we head to breakout sessions to our featured host, Amara.
Thank you, everyone. It's lovely to be here on this Friday afternoon. My name is Amara Aguilar. I teach journalism at the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. Some of my work centers around emerging technology, journalism, social media, design, Latino audiences, and engagement, which I'm really excited to talk with you about today. So you'll notice on the next slide that we have a free gift for you that you should have gotten in your email, or I also put this in the chat, but it's a free engagement journal just for you. It has 10 tips. We'll give you a little bit of the highlights in this presentation today, but you can download it, you can print it. It's meant to be an interactive guidebook. It was designed and also produced in collaboration with my colleague, Sarah Bennett, who I want to give a shout out to, who is going to be one of your facilitators today. But it just is a great way for you to sit back when you have a little bit of time or a few minutes and just look at some ideas and brainstorm of how you can bring more connections to your community into your reporting. And there's space to sketch out your ideas. You can do this on your computer, or we would love for you to print it out and just use a good old paper and pencil and sketch out some of your ideas. So I'm going to cover a few of the highlights from the zine that you were given. The first highlight has to do with something that we found really successful and some other media organizations have found successful. We call them callouts, where we're basically inviting the community to submit content to us. At Annenberg Media, our students, I advise a Latino focused publication called Dímelo, and we did this for Dia de los Muertos. Our team actually invited the community, the LA Times actually also did this as well, invited the community to share pictures and stories of loved ones that they wanted to remember. We used a simple form to do this, but you'll see on the next slide, we also made a physical display on campus that had printouts of pictures that people had submitted, their stories. We also used the display to tell people a little bit more about the artifacts and what they meant on the altar. This actually came together in 3 ways. It came together in the form where we were collecting content in a physical display in our community. And we also had actually 4 ways, a page on our website that displayed the content. And we did an entire Snapchat edition focused on Dia de los Muertos. So we had this actually across 4 different sort of spaces to reach our community. So that's one highlight. A second tip we offer is community office hours. This is where I've seen reporters do this, where come and have coffee with our reporter this week and talk with us about what's happening in your community or what you care about. I've also had, my students really enjoy we call a pop-up newsroom assignment, where we take a table and chairs. Sometimes if we have a little covering, if we're lucky, we'll be covered by the shade. But it's really just a table and 2 chairs. And we go out and set up in front of like a local restaurant or a local store where we've had permission, and just talk with the community. And it could be on a certain theme. They've done it on like, what would you like to ask the new mayor? Or they've even just done it really open and asked questions like, what's your biggest concern in your community right now? Or what do you think the community is doing well? And these are really open conversations that we've had with our community, and they've gone really well. Facilitating community storytelling is another suggestion. This is one great example. I'm based here in LA, so I follow KPC's work religiously, now LAist, and they are leaders in community engagement. I love what they're doing. They did one campaign, how giving parents cameras helped KPCC LAist tell a different kind of pandemic story. Number 4, using Instagram and TikTok. Many people are interested, especially our younger audiences. I just did a panel with young people. Almost, I would say 95% were like, I get my information from TikTok, which was super interesting, even over Instagram. But one thing that we've suggested in the journal is really being thoughtful about how you respond and look through your comments. That's one thing you can do to start engaging more of your readers on these social platforms. Tip number 5 included creating new channels, and we have a few examples. One reporter in LA for LA Taco created a texting channel for the unhoused community, and just through rigorous reporting, building relationships, and providing useful information to the community, his texting channel really gained a lot of people following it, looking there for tips, for practical tips, from hand washing stations to resources. So that's been really successful. And one of my favorite newsletters also is from the LA Times, called the Latinx Files. I get that religiously and love reading it. Tip number 6 included having community events. So KPCC did one on a conversation for Black moms to be. At USC Annenberg, we partnered with LA Taco to do several actually live Facebook Live community events. This was during the pandemic, so we couldn't really be in person at that time, but we did several live conversations. One was around street vendors and their rights. Another was around farm workers. And another was actually just a chef sharing some of their favorite recipes and inviting the community to share their recipes on the same dish. So those were really fun that we've got to experiment with. And then going on to tips number 7, 8, and 9, inside the zine on tip number 7, we have a list of questions and we call it reinventing the interview. And with this list of questions, we hope that you can try to get to know your community a little bit deeper, rather than kind of those quick takeaways that we sometimes need for our stories. And the example given in the zine is actually for education reporting. We wanted to get to know the gaps and needs of our community when it came to their education needs. And we worked with KPCC on that script, so we included it for you to just take a look at to see how can you include more open-ended questions in some of your interviews. 8 and 9 include connecting with community organizations and maker sessions. The example here was an event that we did with a community organization on campus to celebrate Women's History Month. This was during the pandemic, and we actually brought people together on Zoom, and everybody made Canva cards to a woman that inspires them. And it could have been like, this one was to someone's mom. Some people included celebrities or historical figures that they looked up to, but everyone made a card during that session. And we were actually also able to include that on our website and on Instagram. So those are some other examples that you might glean from the zine. And then Tip number 10. Oh, this is another one of the cards that we made at that maker session. I love how people were able to just be creative. And now that many people are back in person, you can do these in person as well. And then tip number 10 is just be versatile and have fun. This was, these are pictures of two actually community zines USC students did with LA Taco. We did 2 printed zines. Yes, I think print is back in a lot of different ways. So look for opportunities. We actually, as far as from a metrics point of view, this was a membership driver for this organization. Our whole goal, this was only given to members, and also we did certain selected drops in the community. But this was used for them to drive memberships, and they had, I think, about 1,800 members when we started distributing the zine, and by the time we finished, I think they grew by several hundred. I think it's around 500 that they grew, which for this organization was really significant. So we were tracking that. It was something new that we tried, and people loved it. People started getting it in the mail, and they're like, where's mine? I want my zine. I want my LA Taco zine. It had a lot of hidden food spots and food stories in LA, and it was really popular. So be creative. We hope you'll use the zine to be creative, come up with some new ideas, document your wins, and also talk about challenges and resources that you might need as well.